Demon Slayer is one of the hottest anime on the air right now. Boasting critical acclaim and high sales, watching this show feels like a no-brainer. So let's discuss the pros and cons, the goods and bads, and everything in between. Oh yeah, and don't forget to subscribe or whatever. If there's one aspect of this show that stands out above everything else, it is the art style. Demon Slayer's art style is heavily inspired by traditional Japanese culture and art, and I love it. I think it fits the show perfectly, and sometimes it's the only aspect that keeps me watching, which isn't something I can say for any other anime that I've watched thus far. There's so much creativity and originality behind it. A prime example of this is the way that this water is animated. So often in anime, water usually follows some sort of realism. So this is a really nice stylistic choice to see. Designs behind demons and humans also feel somewhat unique. No two demons look that alike. And this definitely is not a show where you're going to be mixing up which protagonist is which. They basically all look like Pokemon gym leaders, which I think is a good thing. The vibrant and unique characters are reflective of the vibrant and unique art style, so I think it makes sense in this case. Another aspect of the art style that I really love is the thick outlines. It's kind of a small detail, but I think it helps create a big impact on the show. These thick outlines really help create more dynamic movement and exciting sequences. They're also reminiscent of some of my other favorite anime, such as Attack on Titan in its early days, and some scenes from Hunter x Hunter. I think the last thing that makes the art style so spectacular is that it's supported by phenomenal animation. The animation is literally flawless. Well, maybe not literally, but it's still some of the best animation I've ever seen. There are no obvious moments that are weaker than anything else, and the polish is just over the top. Everything from complex fight sequences to nonsensical comic relief all has great animation quality, which is really impressive. There is so much complex combat in this show. Like literally, I think at least 20 out of the 30 episodes has combat in it. And the fact that it all looks good is it's just impressive. I don't have another word to describe it. And that's not to say all scenes were created equal either. Obviously, some stand out more than others, but there are none that stand out for the wrong reasons. There are just some that take this arty extreme polish and precision and bring it to an entire nother level. Now, it would be such a shame if all of this precision and effort were to go to waste on a story that wasn't that interesting. Luckily, that doesn't happen here. The plot to Demon Slayer might not be the best. You know, it's a little bit repetitive, and some of the characters are, well, questionable, but it's still good. In no way would I say it's the same quality as the animation or the art style, but I don't know any show that would be. Story-wise, this show wastes no time getting into it. The first episode is a pretty solid hook, and there's very little filler. However, there are a lot of training arcs. So if that's something you like, then you'll definitely enjoy them. But if not, it could get a little bit tedious. I'm not a huge fan of training arcs, so there were a couple of times when I was just kind of like, oh, whatever, I'm not super interested. But it could definitely be a lot worse. I think part of what keeps the training a little bit more interesting is that basically every time there's different characters involved, so it never feels super repetitive. Obviously, on the flip side to the training arcs, there's the actual combat, which, as I already mentioned, is a pretty big highlight. The meaning and reasoning behind the conflict isn't that deep, but I don't think it really needs to be at this point. It's still entertaining regardless, and I think that's what's most important about a fight scene. Another aspect that does feel kind of unique is the power system. It's hard to get into without spoiling, but just know that there are multiple different kinds of powers, and none of them have that much overlap. They all basically serve their own purpose. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is subscribing to this channel. Listen, I know I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but if you've made it this far into the video, you really have no reason not to subscribe. Like, you obviously like the content, right? So just take a second to scroll down and hit the big red button. There are a few aspects of this show that I think could use a little bit more fine-tuning. The one I want to talk about first is the characters. Most of the major characters feel kind of one-dimensional. Maybe this is just because it's still a new show, but it really feels like each character fits some sort of archetype. Whether they're the angry guy, the sad guy, the righteous guy, the stoic guy, They all just feel a little bit too one-dimensional at this point. And obviously, I hope this is going to change with time, as some of these characters can be decently annoying. The place that I find these characters most annoying is also what I would consider the weakest part of the show, that being the comic relief. It's mostly just guys being loud, or creepy towards women. It's not all that off the mark from typical shonen anime humor, but I was hoping for some humor that was like a little bit deeper. Like, so many aspects of the show raise the standards of shonen anime, and this style of comedy just kind of does not do that. The other part of the show that I was ever so slightly disappointed in was the soundtrack. The soundtrack isn't bad by any means, but there are undoubtedly some tracks that are overused. The main theme and variations of the main theme feel like they make up like 60% of the soundtrack, when the other 40% is just as good, if not better than the main theme. I don't think any of the tracks are bad per se. I just don't think some of the tracks that were chosen for specific moments fit those moments as well as other tracks could have. This is probably more of a nitpick than anything, but if you're familiar with this channel, you know how important a soundtrack is to me. So, is Demon Slayer worth your time? I would definitely say yes, it is. The positives of this show greatly outweigh the negatives, and even the negatives are like barely negatives. If you have time to watch the 26 episodes and counting, I would undoubtedly recommend you take the time to do so. Thank you all for watching, and if you made it all the way to the end, let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.